Hello, and welcome to Overcome with Travis White. This is a place for you to share your mental health stories. I'm very excited to welcome today's guest. We are speaking with Sarah Michelle Sherman. Sarah is a writer whose work explores mental health, motherhood, and the emotional fallout of divorce with raw honesty and zero filter. Her essays have been featured in HuffPost, Today, and Scary Mommy. She's here to talk about healing, heartbreak, and the messy truth of rebuilding a life you didn't plan for. It's the one thing that really stuck out to me when I read this is raw. I like the raw stories. So, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a great conversation, and I don't want to waste any more time. So, I'm just going to turn the microphone over to you and have you tell the audience about yourself.
Okay. In terms of mental health, I've had a bit of a journey. Around 17, I started experiencing, what would later be explained to me as depression. Um, was, you know, it's hard to say what was normal teenage insecurities and problems that arise with every, teenage girl, but I felt like there was something stronger going on. There was, a dark cloud over everything, so to speak, and just a really, we all have internal dialogue, but the voice that I was hearing was the meanest voice I'd ever heard. So, battling that became extremely challenging. So when I started to, talk about this with my parents a little bit, uh, my pediatrician at the time was the first person to put me on an antidepressant. And that's when everything sort of, I guess, started in terms of really looking into my mental health and what it means for me and what it was going to mean for my life moving forward. So for the next few years, I experimented with a bunch of different SSRIs because for a long time it was I was told I just had, depression, and not just, but was told I had depression and anxiety. And so that's what was being treated on top of some insomnia. So for a long time, I was taking SSRIs and I was taking Ambien and still not feeling better. And then things got real bad. My senior year of college, I overdosed on Ambien after drinking a lot of alcohol and just having a very bad night. It was definitely a wake up call for me and for the people around me, and made the decision then, to actually see a specialist, a psychiatrist, and really try to figure out what was going on with me. From there, uh, still tried different SSRIs, but thankfully, I eventually ended up with a psychiatric nurse practitioner who was the first person who really took the time to understand my story and what I was experiencing. And that's when I got the diagnosis of bipolar and ADHD. I think those diagnoses saved my life.
So, do you have the bipolar 1 or 2 disorder?
I have
So, I know there's
bipolar
a little
2.
bit of difference too. Okay.
Yeah, so when I was first diagnosed, was just told bipolar, but I had a little bit of trouble with that because I didn't feel that I necessarily had a blatant manic episode. And then kind of slowly over the years, I and my doctor and the different therapists that I saw started to recognize these hypomanic episodes, which, I didn't really know what they were, because
Mhm.
they look different for everybody. And for me, it could look like rearranging all of my furniture. It could look like a shopping spree. It could, you know what I mean? It could look like a
Mhm.
bunch of different things that aren't necessarily screaming mania. But, impulsivity and, uh, you know, functioning with less and less sleep and things like that. So finding the right medication and understanding more what was going on chemically was huge for me. It changed everything.
I can only imagine, and I've heard too many people say that. It's just finding that balance, and it's like I was lucky. I was able to find the first thing that worked. I didn't need anything like way harsh, but I hear stories all the time. Well, it took me like 6 different types of medication to finally get the right thing to work.
Yeah, and it's a very difficult process, and weaning off of some of these drugs is the most bizarre, terrible feeling in the world. I mean, I remember getting off of Effexor, and that's the first time I experienced those, they feel like zaps in your brain, and it's awful, and you're, breaking it down into, little a smaller piece each day, trying to get it out
Yeah,
of your system, and it's tough. And what I think I was fortunate that I, over the years, became very aware of when medications were not working for me and when I was starting to slip back into those depressive states. Because I think when it gets the most dangerous is when you aren't able to recognize it. So I was able to, really become an advocate for myself and became more and more comfortable speaking up when I didn't feel right.
I think that's like the most important thing too, is until you figure out how to speak up for yourself. And honestly, I want to say trust yourself to a
Hmm.
degree, because when you're feeling that deep dark depression, there's no trust there. You don't
Right.
care.
Right.
So that's an important step. Like, so kudos to you.
Thanks. It's a work in progress.
Yes, and I feel like, don't you feel like it just never ends at times?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that was something I had to kind of come to terms with, which didn't happen right away, which is, the fact that this is going to be something that I deal with my entire life. There's been times, stretches of time where I've, gone a really long time without a bad depressive episode or, less hypomanic episodes. And I think I'm good, think I'm cured, and start to wean off medications and then quickly realize, no, I need these medications in order to survive.
Yes, for sure. And what was I going to say? I just lost my thought. Okay, I got it back. Sorry.
That's okay.
So, like in those times that you're, the deep, dark, depressive states, what does survival mode look like for you in that everyday life of those deep, dark places?
It's a tough question. I think most recently it's holding on to the fact that I know I've gotten through it before. And if I'm able to latch on to that, then that's, I guess, what carries me through. But sometimes it's really hard to tap into that. But I think having a really good therapist uh, who I feel I can reach out to at any point in time, having a support system, with friends and family, at least having one or two people that, I know I can go to when I'm feeling that low, and they're gonna, no one knows what to say. And there's not anything that anybody really can say to pull you out of that. And people just want to comfort you. And that's what you need. You need to know you're not alone. But it's
Yes.
tough.
Yeah, and I'll say, because I go through some of these depressive modes as well, and I came out of a kind of a dark one. It lasted about 2 months, where it was just like, like, screw this. Like, I don't want to deal with this bull crap every day. But it's like
Hmm.
it all goes back to, I think for me, it's probably my kids, my family. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
I have so much to live for. I need to just figure out how to push things aside. And
Yeah.
then I think also once I realized, like my therapist once told me, no, your depression and your anxiety are never going to go away. You have to, your goal is to figure out ways to deal with them every day and reduce
Right.
them.
Yeah. And I think the parenting aspect of this is huge, because for me, and this is kind of a dark reality, I guess, but becoming a mother kind of changed things for me in terms of my mental health because of the fact that it took it took suicide off the table for me. At least you know, as far as the how I'm managing my mental health right now, and I've been stable for a long time. I haven't been suicidal in a long time. But, you know, thinking of my son, um, it it just makes it not an option anymore for me. And it's sad, it's sad to think that I did think of it as an option at times. But I'm, so grateful for my son for a million reasons. But he keeps me alive. He keeps me going.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love, that it's like that unconditional love that the child brings to you. And it's like this is it. This is a reason to live. And
Right.
I have a friend that's he tells me all the time that's his only reason why he's still alive is because of his daughter. I'm like, that's sad, dude. Like you have a lot more people than that, but I can understand where you're coming
Yeah.
from.
Yeah. It
So
is
would you?
sad. And
Yeah,
go ahead.
nope, you're
That's
you're
what you
good.
go. No,
I was just
I
gonna
think
ask.
it's with the children, it's hard because it goes back, the whole idea of, suicide being a selfish act, and I think when, we think of ourselves as parents, we just cannot be selfish. You can't.
Mhm.
You have to think of your kid first. But I have mixed feelings about the idea of suicide being selfish. So I don't know.
You've read my mind. I do too. I have very mixed feelings, and it's like because I've suffered from suicidal ideation myself. There's been times where I've had stuff planned. I have a problem with like dissociating. There's a time
Hmm.
where I was dissociating. I had something hanging up in the garage, and I was ready to do something, and my wife caught me. It was like 3 in the morning, and I don't remember it. She just told me. This was after we had kids, so she's like, "You need to get help. Like this is it." And I've had
Yeah.
that conversation many times with her. Like I'm indifferent about it. Like I think it's selfish, but not at the same time because
Right.
nobody knows what that person's going through.
Exactly. I think, and I've written about this too, the idea of physician assisted suicide for people who are in, physical pain or, are suffering from something, that can be tested or,
Hmm.
proven, so to speak, and, a terminal illness. But who's to say that depression or bipolar or schizophrenia are not terminal illnesses as well, and I think is a horrible thing to do to the people that love you. But that being said, I don't think the people that love you would want you to be in that much pain. And it's not something that anyone can ever understand. And it's not something I wish everyone understood, you know?
I totally agree. I also get really bad anxiety. So my wife beforehand would be like, why are you acting like this? And I was like, you don't know until you suffer through it. Like I can't really explain it because there's really
Right.
almost sometimes no words for it. And then
Right.
I, this last year, we went through some stuff and she is anxious now. And I never thought she'd be the anxious person. It's good because it evens out. We have anxieties over different things.
Yep. That's
So
good.
that's
A
good.
balance.
But I was like, "You finally understand where I'm coming from now." She's like, "Yeah, I
Yeah.
can finally see it." So that
Yeah.
was it was, like, helpful, but it sucked at the same time.
Yeah. It's a double edged sword.
So do you feel like motherhood complicates depression, or do you think it kind of puts it at ease?
Complicates it. I think it just presents so many more opportunities to doubt myself, I guess, and being really hard on myself is something I've done my whole life. And, you know, the depression, makes it worse and makes it harder to quiet, all that self doubt. But in some ways, it's a really good distraction sometimes. Parenting is an impossible job, and, you know, there's a million things that you can do wrong at any given point, and it's terrifying. But it gives you purpose. It gives you a reason to get out of bed because you have no choice,
Hmm.
and for me, it's like, I don't, I don't want to ever disappoint my son. I don't want, um, you know, it's a hard thing too to think about. Like, I don't want him to see me sad, but, being sad is a part of life. And you have to understand the scope of human emotions, so it's really tricky. And obviously when he gets to a certain age, we'll have, these tough conversations about mental health issues and things like that. Cause, I worry for him too down the road if, you know, a lot of this stuff is genetic. Um, so that's scary. And I've even wondered sometimes, like, he knows I take medicine. I wrote about this once too, like when he was really little, came into the bathroom when I was getting ready and started shaking one of my prescription bottles like a rattle. And it's like, and he's learning to say the word medicine. And, I envision in that moment, like, one day he asked me, like, what are you taking this medicine for? Like, are you sick? And I think about how I'll answer, that question. It's heavy.
Yeah, that's a hard conversation. I'm sure those are some that I'll have to have later on, and I've actually never thought about it until you just said that. So it's like, how do I explain that? Because there's times where I know that my kids, so all my kids are 6 and under, or yeah, 6 and under, and so there's times where I know that my kids know that I'm a little bit off, like whether it's or my I'm just being short that night.
Yeah.
And there's times where I feel really guilty for not being as present as I want to be.
Yes. Yeah, that for me is huge. And that's where I get the most frustrated with my mental health issues because I think, generally speaking, I have a pretty good handle on things. And like I was saying before, like I'm able to recognize, when I start slipping, but it's always there. And there's always there's always this voice in my head that's being mean to me. It just depends on how quiet I can get it, but it frustrates me because it takes me out of the moment sometimes, and all I want to
Hmm.
be is with my 4-year-old and watching what he's doing and paying attention because it is changing every single second and it's amazing to witness. And I, hate the fact that there's this thing I can't control taking me away from that sometimes.
Yeah, I totally agree. Question though, do you have any methods that you use to shut up those voices that are going on in your head, maybe telling you you're not good enough or telling you whatever they are?
Um, I wish I did. I really, it's something I struggle with a lot. I don't The only way I guess I know how to deal with them is to write about them, what they're, it's how I make sense of, most difficult things that I go through is writing about them. And I think exploring uh, the thoughts that, come to me is important for my just how I'm going to manage this for the rest of my life. It's about being honest and not, I talk about this in therapy, like, you can't the more you tell yourself, don't think that, you're going to think it. It's like you have to embrace, these thoughts and kind of just do the work to, um, I guess, understand where they're coming from, but also know that they are not necessarily the truth, and it can get tricky.
Yes, that is for sure. I'm very guilty of having those same thoughts and voices like, and it's most time mine are like, "Oh, you're not good enough. You can't do this." Just like really negative thinking. But I have a question about your writing though. Do you have
Mhm.
any fears that come up when you write so honestly about mental health or other things?
Yeah, it's always, I worry about hurting other people. So that's always a concern. And the more I write and the more relationships that I explore in my writing, um, it gets harder and harder because in order to tell my truth, to tell my story, you know, there's people that are not great characters in the story of my life, and I just feel very strongly that I have to tell my truth. And I think I can do that in a way that, protects the people that need protecting. There's some people that don't need to be protected, and I can't worry about them. And in terms of talking about my mental health struggles, uh, I'm so passionate. I wish more people talked about their mental health struggles. I mean, we're getting better and better all the time, but there's obviously still this stigma. There's people who, you know, dismiss it and downplay it and believe people are using it as a crutch or an excuse. And um, it's, it needs to stop. It's crazy to me that, you know, all these other things that happen to the body, uh, you know, we take seriously, and we understand that these people need treatment and medication, and there's no judgment for it. And when it comes to our minds, there's this judgment, and it doesn't make any sense. Why would anyone choose this?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, I love that. And I think the same thing because it's like, you really think that I'd want to deal with this every day?
right?
It's
Yeah,
not something that I want to carry on and on my shoulders and have this burden. I
exactly.
want to touch base on one important thing that you said though there, and then you led into a good question. Actually, let's go to the question because I like this more. Why do you think we reward people for pretending like we're fine? You kind of spoke about, was that like, you know, society looks down on people for having mental health situations.
Right.
And in the end, I feel like, okay, well, you're acting fine, so you must be fine. And so there is, to me, in my mind, like a reward for it. Why do you think society does that?
I think because when people are honest about their emotions in a way that is not, happy and joyful, it scares people, and I think it makes people uncomfortable. And I think it's easier for people to look the other way and not, address these things. It's just like, you think of like when you run into somebody in the supermarket and you say like, "Hey Bob, how you doing?" And if they say anything other than like, "Fine, how are you?" You're like, "Oh God, I didn't want to hear all about Bob's problems today." It's like it's easier, and it's more comfortable, I think. And but it's also a huge part of the problem because high functioning people can be severely depressed. And I mean, think about all the celebrity suicides that get attention because, no one would ever know. And it's like that's the whole point. So to make assumptions is just kind of silly for anyone.
Yes, yes, 100% true. What do you think, I guess, from your perspective, what does high functioning mental health actually look like behind closed doors?
So For me, there's been times when my depression and has kept me from getting out of bed and I've called in to work. But for the most part, I always did what I had to do. And I went to work and I went to school. And as much as I would be, um, you know, in grad school, freaking out, telling myself I wasn't smart enough to be there. There was no way I could ever do it, crying the night before a paper was due because I am a complete failure, that's what I'm telling myself. And, um, but I get the paper done and I get an A, y- no one would know. And for me, those moments or those episodes of hypomania could result in achievements for me. You know, they would, it could make me really motivated. I, there's been times and, I don't realize it until after. But, one night I sent out like, 10 pitches to different, magazines trying to get essays published. And then, a few days later, I'm like, yeah, I think I was a little manic, but it can be a good thing. It can make you clean your house. It presents itself in a million different ways. But I think just the whole idea that you can never, you can't assume by what people are, you know, presenting on the outside, and how well they're doing. It's like it reminds me, I went to this one, I've been to many therapists over the years and unfortunately a lot of bad ones. And I have an amazing one now, thank God. But I went to one, it was my first session and uh, she says, tell me a little bit about what's going on, and I just say I've been, really depressed and, tell her a little bit. And she said, but you're so tan and pretty. What do you mean? Like, what's the problem? This is going to go well, but it's like, how are you working in mental health? And you can say something like that, you know, but
Yes, I've learned throughout the years that it's like the whole cliche quote, "Don't judge a book by its cover."
right.
Like you really can't. Like,
You
and
can't.
and since I've started this podcast, especially, it's like you have no idea what people are going through.
Right.
The person sitting next in the cubicle next to you at work, could be suicidal, and you have no idea. And it goes back to the whole, I guess, another cliche thing: fake it till you make it.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing because we don't have a choice, we have to make money. We have to provide for our children. We have to keep going, and it's hard to admit that you need help, I think.
Hmm.
And it shouldn't be, but it is. And, it goes, I think, back to, this whole idea that, having these mental health struggles makes you like a weaker person. Like you can't cope as well, or you're, too sensitive. And I think more often than not that because I am so in touch with my emotions and I have a lot of empathy and I think it makes me a more compassionate person and it makes me, more accepting and more patient with people at times, but I don't know, it's the weirdest thing because it's like you want people to understand, but you don't want them to suffer,
Hmm.
it's hard.
Yes, yes, it is very hard. And when you started, when you stopped curating your pain and started telling the truth, was there anything in you that any changes that you noticed? Like what was that like?
So the best thing that, comes out of my writing is whenever someone reaches out and says that they connected to it and that, um, they went through something similar and it made them feel better knowing that someone else understood, and that's kind of always my goal is to impact someone in a way that even though it's a fleeting moment, if it makes them feel less alone, then I did something right, you know? And if telling my brutal, raw, ugly truths is what makes that happen, then I'm happy to do it.
That's a good goal to have. I think just touching that like one person, even if it's out of every 100 people, that's that's where I honestly find the most inspiration like for myself. So it's like, oh, that one person found me, like, and it helped them out. So this is great.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you know though? Like how? Let me think of how to work this better. How can you tell the difference between burnout versus being depressed?
Hmm. Um, I think burnout, there would be more evidence of why you were feeling that way, you know? And whereas like depression, I think it's harder to justify, I guess. You know what I mean? In some ways, like like if you're burned out, it means that you have too much on your plate. You're doing too many things, you have too many responsibilities, you're pushing yourself too hard, you're not sleeping enough, things like that. Whereas depression can just take over with no warning and cripple you, and there's no reason for it.
Yes, totally, totally. And I can't tell you how many times that I've thought, sat there and thought, whether it's depression or anxiety, it was like, okay, why, like, is this even going on? Like, I have nothing to even like
Right.
worry about right now because things are in a good spot. I have nothing
Yeah.
to be depressed about. Like, job's going
Yeah.
okay. Like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I have
Yeah.
kids that love me. I have a family. Like, and it's
Yeah.
just like, bam, here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Feels
it's
like
like just it's a waiting game at that point.
what will tomorrow bring, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I question though, back to your writing, just because I I love what you do and the writing so rawly for that raw writing that you do for and open up to people. Was
hmm
writing something you always wanted to do, or did you just kind of fall into it? How did that come about?
I've always wanted to write. I, I guess I sort of, I think my like moment I attribute to it is in seventh grade, I wrote a short story and, got some praise from my English teacher and felt good about myself for the first time. And then, but it was really in college that I started taking creative writing classes and started to really develop my voice and explore writing just brutally and honestly because I was feeling so much at the time. It was the only way I could kind of process it. And and it was actually like what connected me to two of my professors who became my mentors and really made me feel like I had a little bit of talent and had something to say, which was important. And actually, one of my professors in college, in undergrad, it was the first personal essay class I ever took. And I loved, you know, the style. I didn't even really know what a personal essay was, and was just discovering this new genre and was just really impressed by the professor and the work he had done. And he had taught in prisons and he just had incredible stories. And he suffered from mental health issues. And I wrote an essay for his class, and in it, I was writing about being depressed, and I wrote something in it, something along the lines of, "I wish I could stop breathing, like just for a second, just to see if I would fight," or something like that. Like, I wish I could not breathe, just to see if I would fight to breathe. And the professor was worried about me and ended up getting like a knock at my door from the resident director doing like a wellness check on me. But helped me. It got me to talk, to a counselor there at the school. It just like got me to be even more honest about what was going on. And it was also nice to know that, I had someone who gave a shit.
right? And I've actually never heard a story where a professor actually cared that much. All the
Yeah.
professors, I don't remember having one that like would even think twice about something that I
Yeah.
wrote. So that's
Yeah.
really
That's
cool.
unfortunate. Yeah. Yeah. I was lucky to have a few really incredible professors, both in undergrad and in my graduate program, who just really made me feel seen and understood and like I could be a writer, which was everything to me.
That's really cool. It kind of goes back to what you've said at the very first of the show, having people in your corner.
Hmm.
And I think that is means for every aspect of life, not just mental health. Like it should be, to me, it should be everything.
Yeah. Need your people.
You sure do. And it's like, it's not just it's the right people. It's like you need
Yes.
those people. I think that's important because it's the right people. You want somebody who's willing to listen to you when you just need to talk, somebody who's willing to give you advice when you need it.
Yep.
But that's not just any advice. Like you need the raw truth. Like you need
Yes.
people to be blunt once in a while.
Yeah. And you need people who, will carry all the versions of you,
Hmm.
and yeah, and not judge you for it.
Exactly. And it's, well, the people who are judging you, and it's like, well, it's something
They're
about
not
them.
your
It's not
people.
you. Yeah, they're not your
Right.
people. And I actually went through kind of an intense therapy session about this. And I remember he's like, well, if that's going on, you need to let go of this person. You shouldn't have any contact with them.
Yeah.
And so that time I remember I started being more upfront with people and saying, like, no, like, I don't need to be treated this way. If you want to treat me this way, like, I'm
Yeah.
going to cut all ties.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, the more honest you are with yourself about what you need from people. And I think it's important to to have different expectations for different people and the roles they play in your life. And, you have to you have to have different relationships with every single person in your life, and each of those people can help you, in different ways and love you in different ways. And, some of them will be better when you're feeling down and some of them will be better when you're just want to have a good time, but you need them all.
And yeah, sometimes it's hard to figure out those people. I remember this too. And because I have like certain expectations with people, whether family members or friends or whatever. And
Mm,
it's my anxiety. Sometimes it's like when those expectations aren't met, like it hits me in the face like a pound of bricks. I'm like, well, why did it happen this way? So at one point, my therapist was like, no, you need to, at some point with some of these people, you need to lower your expectations
yeah.
because otherwise, this part of you is always going to fail
Yeah, you're always going to be disappointed.
all the time. And I was like, and as soon as I was able to do that and set the correct boundaries, I realized like some of my
Yeah.
relationships got better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just have honestly a few more questions here for you.
Okay.
What's one uncomfortable truth about healing people don't talk about?
Uncomfortable truth about healing. I think, wow, that's a good question. I think the thing about healing is that for me, I'm not to a place yet where I certainly don't feel healed. I don't even know that I would say that I'm in the process of healing because I still feel like I have so much to figure out. And I think that that's maybe the uncomfortable truth is that there is just so much uncertainty, which makes it really terrifying because there's so many unanswered questions when it comes. to this stuff. And I just think it makes it, it makes it more painful. I think things that have proof are easier, you know?
Very well said. Because what you reminded me of something that I can't remember the exact quote, but something was said to me once about healing. It's like, are we ever fully healed? Like, do we ever really get there? It's like to think about it, we really don't. It's just a continuous journey.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, because, there's life should be full of ups and downs and there's always going to be things that, you know, break you down and make you feel like you failed or that you can't go on. But there's also going to be things that bring you joy and make you feel like things are possible. And that's what you got to hang on to, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. And I just you just made me think of something really dumb, but it's you're in those moments of joy and it's like then something bad happens, like, okay, well, does this shit ever end? Does it ever end?
Right. Exactly. And I don't think it ever does. I think it's just, I don't know, for me, I'm just so grateful that I, have been given platforms to be able to write about it. And it's what I plan to continue doing. I think it'll be what helps me battle this for the rest of my life is having this outlet. And I think, my goal is to publish a book and, reach more people. And like we were saying before at the show, like it's just breaking the stigma, the conversations around these topics need to continue to evolve and there needs to be more awareness and there needs to be more compassion.
Yeah, I agree. And it's I think the thing to mention there is starting those conversations and making it's going back to something you said, I think at the beginning, is making it so people don't feel alone. And sometimes when somebody feels that way, that's when they come out of their box or their dark
Right.
spot and start telling their story.
Yes,
And I think that's like one of the things that we need to do going forward is just continue telling our stories.
absolutely.
So where can people find you?
SarahMichelleSherman.com. And my Instagram handle is Sarah Michelle Sherman as well.
Looks like I just lost my oh, it's okay though. It's the last question. So
Okay.
we've just had a lot of discussion here, mainly about like depression and mental health.
hmm
Is there anything else that you'd like to bring up that we did not cover tonight?
I don't think so. I think I just, I would encourage everybody to, reach out to people that you care about and make sure they know that they're loved and that they're seen and that, um, that they're valued because you never know what someone's going through and you never know the voices that are going on inside their head. It can, you can save someone's life. And I think it's just important to, I tell my son all the time, to be kind. And he'll say to me, "Why are you always telling me that?" And it's like, because it is the most important thing.
Yes, very important. Very well said. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show. Sorry about these last minute technical difficulties.
That's okay. Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
And I do want to say I admire the rawness that you present, and I love what you're doing, telling such, you know, uh, raw, having such, what's the
Yeah.
word I'm looking for? Just the way you're writing your essays, because it's like
Yeah.
not very many people do that. They don't show that raw side of themselves, and I think it's important.
Thank you
So
so
thank
much.
you.
I appreciate that a lot.
And thank you to all those that are listening. If this episode resonated with you, please share it and give us a follow, and that help us out a lot. Thanks again. Until next time.